Hey guys, Mike Taylor, aka Battleship Cobra here, but first, let me take a couple of precautions. But all joking aside, I hope everybody is staying safe and doing as well as you can do during this period. Today we're going to cover a B1UP topic. We're going to cover a nice little trick to update the BP when it's loaded from the document without double triggering the validation. Before we get started, I just wanted to mention www.battleshipcobra.com for all the stuff about me, notably my Udemy courses for SQL for SAP Business One, Crystal Reports for SAP Business One, and also my tips and tricks for working from home, and that one's free. Check it all out, and thank you guys so much for your support. If you have been using B1UP for a little while, you have probably gotten some sort of request to update a marketing document based on a business partner being loaded. This isn't necessarily as simple as it seems, because triggering off of items 4 or 54, the BP code or the BP name, could result in your validation being triggered twice. Since you can't control how the users are going to enter the information, some are going to search for the name of the BP and some are going to search for the code, I have come up with a simple little solution that I use for all my customers, and I will show you how to do this today. It's relatively simple, and it's a nice little tutorial with some examples in B1UP. Let's go. So the first thing you want to do is enable B1 validation configurations, modules, administration, add-ons, B1 usability package, B1 usability config. Use B1 validation system. This needs to be checked. So obviously my system has it checked. If you don't have it checked, it will kick users out to make new fields and to make new tables. So make sure you back up your SAP database before doing this and do it after hours, or make sure you let all of your users know that you're kicking them out. So I'm going to show you what the standard approach to this would look like. The request from the user might sound something like, when a business partner is selected on a document, please pop up a message box with some information like customers on hold, or here's some freight information. I'm going to use my AP down payment invoice, not for any other reason than the fact that it doesn't have as much customization on this database. I just wanted a clean form that I could use. This can be replicated across all of your forms. I'm just going to do it for the one, and you can use your B1 validations across multiple forms. So you can use the same validation, and I'll show you where you would put multiple forms if you need to. So what you're going to normally do is you need to add a B1 validation, which you can consider something like a B1 trigger. So what we're going to do is we're going to right click, we're going to select B1 usability package, and then we're going to click add B1 validation configuration when this item is validated. When this item is validated means that you're leaving that particular field. So you're going to see that it put item number 54, view your system information, and it put all the other information you need for a standard way of putting this B1 validation. So this is what reads what is going to trigger the particular function that we're going to run. So normally what I like to do is I need to put some sort of name. I'm going to put OXXX because in my case, I would be potentially reusing this on multiple documents. So I just put O, and then that lets me know that it's on the documents. Now with B1UP, you can easily find where a particular function is used. Previously, you didn't necessarily know, so I like to just do it that way. So I put, that means to me, like if I was going to do it on an order only, I would have ORDR. If I'm putting on a delivery, I'd have the header table there just for my reference. So I'm going to say like BP load functions. You can see it puts the form type. If you add additional form types, you can just put a semicolon there, and the semicolon would allow you to have many, many forms in there, and it'll function the same way across all the documents. In the same way, we can put multiple items. So I'm going to add number 4 because I want both the code or the name. So just by doing that, it'll read both of these fields, and whenever you leave that field, it is going to trigger our function. We're going to leave everything else the same for now, and we are going to add our new function. So I'm going to click no condition, just execute the function. You can get more complicated, and you can even read SQL and say under certain conditions trigger the function. In this case, we're just trying to keep it simple to show you an example. Click new. We're going to type OXXX BP load functions. I just put macro. Just to remind myself if I'm looking at a list. These are all the universal functions. So you can think of the B1 validations as the trigger, and then you can think of the universal functions as the actual action. So there's a whole bunch of stuff in here. The one that I'm going to use probably the most is macro, and I'm going to use a macro setup. And then you use B1UP's commands. So B1UP syntax is listed here. I'm not going to go too much into the actual macro commands. You can look at the Boyum YouTube page for tutorials. You can look at the Boyum documentation. I'll link the online documentation below. So what we're going to do is we want to pop up a message box. So we're going to type message box. You can also pick the type message box. I just like to do it this way. I like to have more control manually. So I'm going to say message box triggered. So this is just going to pop up a message box. It says triggered. That's it. This is just an example for today of what we're doing. And this can be anything that you want too. So a lot of the times they'll have like pop-ups that are specific to the BP. You can read SQL in those message boxes. You can do so many things with it. I can't cover everything in just this quick video. So this is all good. Form mode. Add OK update, that's okay for what we're doing. We're not going to get really tricky in here. If you only want it on add mode, you only want it on OK or update, you can select that there. So I'll leave all the rest of these here. So now we're going to try it. Right click. Oh, look, it triggers in here. Uh-oh. What's going on? So you go and you select your vendor, you push tab, it triggers it once. It automatically goes to the next field, and then you trigger it twice. So my workaround today is going to make it so that you only load it one time, and so that if you do change it, it will modify and it will update it another time. So you can continue to reuse the same say sales order if you want, but it won't trigger it twice this way. And it'll let you run your functions without that duplication. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to add a UDF. And what I like to do is on the marketing document, I'm going to add a UDF called data load. And I'm going to make it 15 characters for the 15 characters of the business partner code. Because ultimately we're going to store the code there. And I'll show you why. So we'll just do data load. You can call this anything you want, just make it alphanumeric 15 and add it to your marketing documents. You have to add all that stuff. Okay, so first thing we want to do with our new UDF is place it. So modules, purchasing, AP down payment invoice. Again, I'm just using that as an example. Open up your UDF sidebar. You'll see data load. I'm just going to right click B1 usability package, add this UDF onto the main window. Click below. I'm going to put it in balance due just below it. And then I'll close this horrible, ugly UDF sidebar. Right click, click B1 usability package, click edit item placement tool configuration. So we're going to edit where it was placed, and we're going to do a couple things. So we have a few things already set up here. You're going to see data load. You could change your item UID to data load if you want. You don't have to. It might make it easier for you to understand what the UID is. It does most of the setup for you. And in particular, what I like to do is I like to uncheck effects form mode so we can change it without impacting the update or OK mode when we are using it, because we're using it only as a placeholder and ultimately we're going to hide it. Second thing I like to do is I like to change the back color to something that's like kind of ugly. No offense, but pink. It's really bright pink. Just so I don't forget to hide it. I don't need it to be visible for it to do its job. I will leave this here for now to test, and then I will just hide this. Usually I just set it on 999 pane, and then it will be hidden, but still usable by me, but I don't need it to be seen by me to work. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take the same approach. B1 usability package, add validation configuration. When this item is validated, OXXX, BP load functions. We're going to set it on the, leave it on the form type. We'll do 4 and 54. Those are the items. So you can right click, copy system information. You can see it's item 54. You can also see it in the bottom left. Just make sure you have view system information on. So I already know that it's 4 and 54 because I've done this quite a few times. So we're going to leave it on that. We are going to use an SQL condition though this time so we can read what is in that data load field, and then we're going to use that to compare against the BP code field, and that's what's going to allow us to filter our trigger. Common SQL structures, so we're going to use select case 2. I think it's just the easiest. So we're going to say copy system information here. Put that there. So we're going to say when that is not equal to our data load, then run. Okay? So you can evaluate a lot of different things in here in this B1 validation trigger. Remember, you can have a single trigger. You could say this, you could potentially do this for like both sales and purchasing documents, and then trigger it in different ways for vendors, if it's a vendor, or if it's a purchase order or an AP, AP document versus AR document. You could do anything you can think of using these triggers. And this will streamline your system so that you don't need to run the macro if you don't have to. And in this case, we're going to say don't run it if it matches. So we're going to say if what's in the vendor code doesn't match what's in data load, then run it. And I'll show you why we're going to do that in a second. So conditions, we'll say run. Let's make our new function. New. So we'll go OXXX, BP load functions, macro again, macro message box, triggered. And we can read using dynamic syntax like whatever we want. So we could put $$, 4.0.0, $, 54.0.0. You can put anything you want in there. I'm just using this as totally as an example. This is something that does happen. People want the information, and you can pull a UDF of notes from the BP into this window too. So that's something that's pretty common. Then what we're going to do is we're going to say set, and we're going to set, once this runs, the data load field to be equal to the BP code. And then we're going to document this. So we'll say set data load to be the same as BP code for validation. Just so we know what's going on, I like to document it. A lot of the times you forget. In this case, it'll be pretty straightforward, but just so you know. And what I like to do is I also like to set a status bar message. So we'll just say BP load function triggered. Then I usually put whatever the universal function is. And then I'll put success. So the status bar message just allows me to know which universal function ran. And especially when you're doing automatic things that maybe are not triggered by a direct user input, it's good to know. And it's really good for troubleshooting. because you can see in the footer area here what BP or what universal function just ran. Another thing that's really smart to do is to freeze the form. I'm really particular about this, so I'll freeze. Then what you don't have, what you won't get is the cursor moving around on the form that you're using. So you freeze the form, make all your changes, then you unfreeze the form. So anything that you're doing that affects the form, I would put between a freeze and an unfreeze to make things look really nice. It cleans things up a lot. So I'll just do the message box first, then I'll freeze and unfreeze. So sometimes these functions will be, I don't know, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 rows long. I have some that are really long that set a bunch of fields. They set, you know, depending on the sales employee, what's going to happen, sets all sorts of things. This is a very simple example, but what you do with this validation trigger after you set it up is up to you and up to your users. So I'm going to add that. I'm going to add my, we'll call this V 2.0, and we're going to add it here. So I'll close this. So now what you get is when you go to select your vendor, let's just pick vendor number 67, tab, you get triggered one time, V001 vendor 67, just the functions that we ran. And then when you tab out of there, you don't get that again, right? But you see here in this data load, it was written there. And again, we're gonna hide that so users don't need to see. So maybe the user made a mistake and they need to switch it. Switch it to vendor 1, tab. You see it runs the functions, sets the field down here in data load to be equal to the BP code. And when you tab out again, it just ignores it. So the nice thing is it'll keep running those functions. And if you want to change that, say on a flexible document like a sales order or PO or whatever, it'll keep running those functions again. So it's really clean and easy that way. So I'm going to quickly improve that universal function. And then I'm also going to show you how to make the trigger run when you're moving in between documents, which is another useful thing that can happen when you need to do BP load functions. So what we're going to do, right click, B1 usability package, edit B1 validation configurations. Here we have both the old one and the new one. I'm just going to click the new one. We're going to click the universal function that we're using. So with this message box triggered, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually move this here. I'm just going to set this quick notes just equal to the vendor code and vendor name. You can also use SQL to pull some sort of quick notes right from the vendor, from a UDF in the vendor or whatnot. So I'm just going to do that. So let's take this. We'll just comment this out. Oh, that bug. And we'll put this in our freeze. We're going to set, right click, copy information, boyx1. We're going to set it to testing. And then we'll just output the vendor code, vendor name as an example. Always important to put documentation within your code. It makes it a lot easier because you'll probably forget. So now if we run this again, let's switch this back to vendor 67 tab. See, it runs it here. Again, this could be whatever you want. Boom, puts the information there and you're good to go. So this could literally be any function you want. That's just a quick example there. Now we're going to clean up this data load and clean this field up and show you that it still works. Then we're going to talk about data load for another B1 up trigger. Right click, B1 usability package, edit item placement tool. You're going to go down to your data load, and what I normally do is I just put this on pane 999. It doesn't make it disappear entirely. It just makes it out of view of the customer or the user, and for yourself too. So we're going to come back there, purchasing, AP down payment invoice, and now we don't see it. So it's still usable. Right click or tab, select. The functions still do what they need to do, doesn't interfere with anything, and it's just gone nice and clean, so you can store it that way. So the other little bonus thing here is if you, like sometimes people are using these quick notes where they want to update it every document. They don't want these to just be statically pulled one time. If you just need them to be statically pulled one time, you're basically done. But sometimes they'll want to output up at the top maybe the account balance of that BP or customer. You can do that too pretty easily, just using a data load B1 validation. So the first step in order to do that, right click your form, B1 usability package, add B1 validation configuration, which is the trigger, and then you can just say when data is loaded into this window. So we'll say OXXX BP data load functions on load. Okay, it does everything you need to have it set up this way. You can switch the form modes. We'll just say add OK update. We'll just say OK and update because we're just going to do this when it's scrolling in between documents, so it will update it, right? So what we want is we don't even need a condition there. We can just run this here and we will click that. Go here. We will pick this one. Make sure it's the right one. I didn't put 2.0 on there. I should have. So we put universal function 135 there. We're going to add this trigger. So if we're moving between documents now, we're going to see that it updates each time. Willow group. So it's very quick and it updates when I'm moving in between documents. So this might not be what's actually in that UDF, but what happens is because it's on the data load function, it will show what is being run with those triggers. And you can see at the bottom, it's showing you that the status bar is being triggered with that function. So the last little note on that with the quick notes is you just need to right click, check your edit item placement, and just make sure that the quick notes does not affect form mode. So quick notes does not affect form mode. You don't need to store that there because you're always going to be refreshing it. So a lot of the fields, especially system fields, if you're moving between them and you're making changes, it will force the form into update mode. And if you've done some things with formatted searches, you'll know how annoying that is because every time you move between a form, it's going to make you update. So you can't just scroll between them. So this, when it doesn't update form mode, you can just go between them. There's only a couple in here, but it shows you that it's refreshing it. So again, if you're looking at like BP or say like vendor balance of orders, you can update that there and it won't impact it. It'll just refresh it in the background every time you scroll between it or every time you load the form. I hope that tutorial was useful. You need to know a little bit about B1UP, but it will give you a nice little trick that you can use to accomplish something that's commonly requested by users on the marketing document and do it really smoothly. Thank you very much for tuning in. I make new videos every Monday at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Subscribe, like, and if you don't visit YouTube very often, click the notification bell and you'll get an email anytime that I make a video. I really appreciate all the comments. I really appreciate you guys engaging. If you have any topics, please post them in the comments below. It helps me to think of ideas and I kind of build them all up and I rank them based on how many people have asked for that particular topic. So if you like these B1 videos, B1UP videos, let me know. And until next week, see you then.